Hi everybody, this is Memo Valverde, London Foster. We're going to be going over some training on a section of www.londonfoster.net. We're going to be going over Office Manager, the Forms and Contracts section. Specifically, we're going to be looking first at the exclusive right to sale contract, which you can access from your Office Manager, Forms and Contracts. You scroll down and you will find your exclusive right of sale. If you click on it, you'll be able to open up the PDF. If you look at that blank PDF, you can obviously print this and share this with your clients, send it to them via email. Obviously, we're going to be using taking advantage of our Miami Association. We're going to open up a screen and go into our Miami Association, which is miamire.com. Once you go there, you will be opening up the dashboard. You need to make sure to log in, put in your license number and your password. And once you put in your license and your password, bear with me 1 second, 33. Okay, once you put that in, you're going to get to the dashboard, and on the dashboard we are going to be using Form Simplicity to fill out this form. Before you fill out any form, since we are dealing with a property, you need to know certain information about the property. You need to know the folio number. You obviously need to find out and confirm that the person that you are listing the property for is in fact the owner. If they are not the owner, then you need to find out why. If they're under an association or some kind of LLC, you need to make sure that you have proof of that LLC. It's usually the first page of the LLC. You can also check Sunbiz. So what we're going to do first is we're going to identify a property that we're going to work with. So I'm going to open up two things. I'm going to open up first I'm going to open up Matrix, and then I'm also going to open up IMAP. So I'm going to look for the property on Matrix first. So this is a little trick that you can use when you're trying to find a property. Obviously, if the property's been listed in the past, you will be able to find that property under somebody else's MLS, but it'll have the folio number. If you do not have that because the property has never been listed, then you will have to go to IMAP. So we're going to work on a property now, and I'm going to look for it. This property is currently listed right now. The listing is expiring, and I will be taking over that listing, so it behooves me to find it. The property's at 5025 Collins, and the unit is 1604. So since I know that the property is currently listed, you will see right here under one match, I'll be able to open this up. And this MLS number is under another realtor. It is expiring the 24th, at which point I will be taking it over. So if you look at this property right here, under the folio number, this is the number we're going to need. If you click on that folio number, automatically it's going to open up IMAP for you. Under IMAP, we have a lot of information that we can identify. We're going to have the PID, or the property identification number, which is also your folio number. You're going to see what kind of property it is. You're going to see the address, but more importantly, you're going to find out who the owner is. Okay? So let's say, for instance, you did not have the folio number. This is where you would go. You would go to the IMAP section. You want to make sure that you do a new search, and then you would have to find the property the old-fashioned way, which means typing in the address. And now that I typed in the address, it's going to tell me that it doesn't have it. The reason why is because it's kind of tricky. They're going to make sure that you look for it a little bit less specifically. So this is going to be this is a list of 80 properties that are all under that building. Bear with me 1 second. So I would have to go one by one, looking through these, making sure that I find 1604. And when I find 1604, then I could look up the PID number or the property ID number or the folio number, and that way you can go ahead and access it. Okay, so now we know what our property ID number is. We had it from before. Obviously, if I found it here, that would have been great, but we don't want to spend any time doing that. So I have this folio number, which is highlighted right there. Okay, once I have the folio number, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to go back into my dashboard, and I'm going to open up Form Simplicity. Form Simplicity is the official contract software that we utilize at London Foster. The reason why is because it's owned by the Florida Association of Realtors. It is obviously the most updated form of using contracts. I recommend that you purchase the e-sign function. A lot of people like to use .loop and other software. This makes it easier because basically from within this software you can assign the signature sections that have already predestined to whoever you want it to sign. You can also forward the ability to assign the signing section to the other realtor, making their job a lot easier. So that's something you want to look into. At London Foster, we've already created all of the libraries here. So if you look here, you'll see Home, Library, Active, Archived, Contact, Packages. We're going to look at the library. These libraries have already been created by our broker, and when you go into the library, you'll be able to go into Form Packages. And we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different packages that have already been created. What is a package? Basically, it's all a group of contracts that he's packaged up together so that it makes your job a lot easier when you're sending out a package or a contract to be signed. As I said, we're going to be doing the listing package for sale. So you would click on this one, and that'll open up a folder that has specific contracts that are used for getting the listing agreement for a sale. What would those be? Well, that would be the exclusive right of sale as a transaction broker, the non-lawyer disclosure form, and then the seller's property disclosure for both a condominium and a residential. Since this one we know is a condominium, I'm going to go ahead and check the 3 that apply to it, and I'm going to create a transaction for this package. So I've clicked these 3 sections, which are the 3 contracts within this package that I want to utilize, and I want to create a transaction. I'm going to create a transaction, and I'm going to write the street address, 5025 Collins Avenue, apartment 1604, Miami Beach, Florida 33140. Here it asks you for a transaction name. If you want to name the transaction the same as the property address, which is what we recommend you do, that way there will only be a transaction per package, you can do that. You can either select all forms and files, or since I selected the 3 that I wanted, we're going to select the selected forms and files. And then we're going to hit save. What that's going to do is that's going to create a folder with the name of the property that I just decided on, and put those 3 contracts into that package. And then that'll appear under active. That'll be an active file that you're working on. And again, just reiterating, the address that I utilized is here. The 3 contracts that I added are here. You have a specific email address for this package, which is a great tool for you to use, because when your clients are asking you to add something to it, or you have an addendum, or maybe you want to add the driver's license to that, or we want to add some other items, which I'm going to show you in a little bit how you do that, you want to make sure you add those there. So that email address is very important. And then you have the 3 contracts that I decided to put in. Okay? So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Matrix. Since I already have some information on here, I clicked on Matrix, and again I opened up the IMAP. Since I need to have proof of this IMAP information, because I'm going to share this with my client, and I'm going to tell my client, based on the information that appears as your tax records, this is the way I created the contract. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask to print this as a PDF. So I want to save it as a PDF, or I can print this page. I'm going to do a save as a PDF. Okay, so this PDF that we have here has the tax information for that property. and I'm going to save it as, on the desktop, I'm going to write IMAP 1604. If you click on this information right here, this link right here, from IMAP, it's going to open the actual tax record for Dade County in this instance, and you're going to want to look at this information. Okay, for some reason it did not work. So we're going to go back and copy it, which means that it hasn't been linked. But we can go ahead and copy that folio number. So I will go ahead and copy and pasted that folio number, and I'm going to look this up. So I recommend that you also make a PDF of this, as you want to attach this. I do the detailed report. You want to attach this to your contract. It makes you look a lot more professional when you're presenting to your client, but also what you're doing is you're telling your client, based on the information that's public record, that's what I utilize. So if for any reason your client feels that that public record is wrong, at least you've disclosed it now before you even put the listing into the market, versus disclosing it when you're already in contract and you've already sold it. Okay, so here I'm going to save this onto my desktop, and I'm going to call this tax information for 1604. Okay, so now that we've identified those two PDFs, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into my mail. Okay, so now that we've saved those two files as PDFs, what we're going to do is we're going to email it to ourselves within Form Simplicity. Here we go. So remember how I told you had that email address? That email address is meant for you to be able to email yourself any documents you want. I'm going to copy that email address, and now I'm going to go into my email where I've opened up a window. I'm going to put that email as the recipient. Okay. And I'm going to upload or attach, better yet, those two files that I created. One is called Tax 1604. The other one's called IMAP 1604. Okay, so I'm going to write here 5025 Collins Avenue 1604. Okay, so by sending myself that email under that email address, I get to upload any documents I want. So if you want to put in somebody's driver's license, you want to put in, maybe they filled out the disclosure by hand and you want to have a file of it there. If you want to have these two documents, be it the map or IMAP or the tax information, you want to make sure you put it in there. So now I'm going to go back into Form Simplicity, and I can go into Active. And if I give it a minute, they will appear right here under Files. Okay, so I'm going to give that a minute for it to appear. But in the meantime, we're going to go into Content. So we have this file, which is an active file for this property, and we're going to go into Content. Now under Content, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go back to your matrix and copy that folio number, and we're going to go ahead and put it in right here in the tax search section. So first I'm going to pick the county, which is Miami-Dade. And then I'm going to paste it. Make sure to eliminate any zeros, and you're going to find the tax data. What that will do is that'll go into IMAP, look for that property ID or that parcel ID or that folio number, and based on that folio number, it's going to pull in all the information that is public record into your actual contract. So here we're going to select it, and if we scroll down, we'll be able to see that all the information that is public record be it the address, the city, the state, the county parcel, the full description, who the owner is. All of that information will be saved. I recommend that you save it now. And that will put you back to the active file. We're going to go back into content. And since what we're working on is a listing contract, I'm going to put in the price. And I'm going to save it again. All the rest of the information should be filled out. If your information is not filled out for some reason, here's London Foster, who is your broker. So your broker would be Bobby Mahalati. His broker ID would be LNFS01, as in London Foster 01. And your broker ID, broker email, which is obviously Bobby at londonfoster.com. You're going to want to write in your agent information as it appears on your license. So I wrote in my full name, my license number, and my email. And you can obviously fill out your phone number. Remember, this actual file, this actual active file, we're going to be able to include other things into it. So we're going to be able to use it when we get a contract. So it's a good idea to invest the time in doing this. You want to make sure you save it. And it's going to throw you out back into the active file. Once you're in the active file, you'll be able to open up every single one of these contracts. We're going to open up the first one, the exclusive right to sale. And it's going to have imported all that information that you put into the content page. It's going to put it into the contract. Now that we're in the contract and we've brought in all the information from the content section of Form Simplicity, we're going to be able to manipulate this contract and fill out the different parts of the contract. It is important to note that all these numbers here represent the line on the contract. So when someone tells you on line number 8 or line number 9, you know where to look at. You also want to make sure you notice that there is an asterisk next to some of these numbers. That represents a section of the contract where by law you have to fill it out. So for instance, in line 2 with an asterisk, you're going to have the seller's name. Line 3 with an asterisk, you're going to have the broker's name. If you see number 6, it says it has an asterisk, and what it's asking for you here is it's asking you when is the beginning of the contract and when does this contract terminate. It is my recommendation you do not take a contract for less than 6 months. The average in this market is somewhere between 3 and 6 months. You want to make sure that if you're investing the time and the energy and the money on putting a listing actively, that you have that at least that time. So since today is June 24th, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick that today is June 24th. Obviously, I'm not going to do this for 6 months until December 24th. I would like to finish out the month. So more than likely, I would say January 1st. So give yourself at least 6 months, usually finish out the month, and maybe start out with the next month. Next, it's going to bring you down where it's asking you for a description of the property, which we have already filled out from the content section. Okay. It's going to ask you for line 15, which is the legal description. That's already been filled out. Personal information, including appliances. Okay, that has to do with what it is you are selling within the apartment. So in other words, if you are selling all the appliances, you want to make sure you include that. If it's fully furnished, you want to make sure you include that. If there is anything else that is being sold with the house I don't know, a jet ski or something else that you're putting in with this property, you want to make sure that you include it in here. So I would write here exactly what it would be. So I would write refrigerator, wall oven, okay, so here I listed refrigerator, wall oven, microwave, range top, hood, trash compactor, dishwasher, washer, dryer. You want to make sure you put that all in there. If it's a very detailed list, you can click on see attached and make an addendum. You would name that addendum 001 and you would list everything there. So now we're going to section 20, occupancy. You want to make sure you identify whether the property is occupied or vacant. If it is not occupied, you click on here. It is not occupied. If it is occupied, you would click on this one, and you need to advise when the lease is terminating. 22 is going to be the price. '23 is going to be the financing terms. These financing terms are usually something you want to discuss with your owner, whether they're willing to take a conventional loan, whether, obviously cash is king, everybody wants cash, whether they're willing to take a conventional loan, and whether or not the property applies for a VA or an FHA. In this instance, it does not, so you would not click this section. 24 is if the seller is offering financing. Let me do that again. 24 is if the seller is offering financing. It is not very common, but sometimes the seller wants to offer financing. You would click here. If the seller is allowing the buyer to assume the mortgage, then you would click here and you would have to write in the terms of the assumption of the mortgage. Again, it's not very common, but you want to make sure that you fill this out, as the lender has to also approve, and there's other, specifications that you have to have. Here it is, the seller expenses. Seller will pay mortgage discount or other costs not to exceed blank of the purchase price. Again, not very common, but it's important to know that it's there. Broker obligations, multiple listing services, it explains it. It's interesting for you to read it to your client. Broker authority. This has to do with your seller permitting you to display the property on the internet, except for the business address. Usually you don't fill any of this out, but if there is an issue with putting the business the street address, you want to make sure you fill this out. And also that whether or not the seller does not authorize, again, not very common. The whole purpose of getting a listing is to be able to list it, but you want to make sure that you have those options just in case. Here it advises that we're permitted to put in a sign, that we're permitted to obtain a mortgage representation, that we're permitted to do a CMA on it. This section, number 60, has to do with using a lockbox or a Supra and withholding verbal offers and withholding any offer once it's been accepted. These are 3 sections that have been put together, but basically what you're doing here is you're trying to get the owner to understand that once we get into contract, you are not going to be telling him, hey, I got something better, because we're already in contract. You also are going to be withholding any verbal offers, and that's something that I recommend you do, because you want to make sure that all your offers are in writing with proof of funds or a pre-qualification. And here, this is the section where you're going to be explaining that to them. And finally, the part about the lockbox has to do with the property. If the property is vacant and you're putting it on a lockbox or hopefully on a Supra, which is a better investment of your time and energy. Virtual offices. This has to do with listing it on the internet and being able to put it so that you can get CMAs on it, and that you authorize for other websites to access this information to promote it. This is stuff like Realtor and Trulia and Zillow and any other website that, from the 70,000 that we have access to. Because what they're going to do is they're going to gather that information, and based on they're going to give a CMA. So you just want to make sure that they do not click on that, so that you are authorized, and therefore you get as much advertising as possible. Okay, section number 92. It has to do with the property disclosure. We're going to have him fill out a property disclosure also. But this has to do with anything that is a code violation, any restriction, any local business, any local government building violation code, or any defect on the property. Usually, if this is something, you want to make sure that your client has filled this out, that your client explains this to you, and it's going to be filled out in detail in the disclosure. But this is the section where you protect yourself. For instance, if there is an issue with the land, where there's a river that's gone through it, or if there's an issue with a code violation that's going to cost the new buyer a fortune once he buys it, you want to make sure that you know about it and that you've disclosed it. Now comes the fun part, compensation. It automatically fills out 6%. That is our goal. That is what we go for. If you have negotiated the price down, this is where you would do it. But you want to make sure that you put that at 6% of the total purchase price. Section 8 is compensation, which is our most important part, which is basically where we identify what we're being paid for listing and selling this property. Automatically, the system is going to put in the number 6. That is what our goal is to get 6%. Obviously, if you've negotiated that down, this is where you would change it. In Section A, what you are saying is that you are going to compensate, you're going to be compensated 6% of the total price, okay, of the total purchase price. There's a section to put an addition or plus, and it says that you are going to be paid no later than the date of the closing specified on the sales contract. In other words, at closing, the title company is going to be paying your commission. However, the closing is not a prerequisite for broker's fee to be earned. Section B, Section B has to do with when a broker is being compensated otherwise. In other words, if the buyer is paying a portion, so here you would say, if the buyer's paying this, but usually what we're doing is Section A. So this one has to do with if the buyer's paying a section, you want to make sure that the broker is being paid by the seller minus whatever compensation that's being done. And C has to do with the gross value. Again, we usually use A. Okay. Under Section E, the retained deposit, as a consideration of the broker's service, broker is entitled to receive, and here it says 50% if left blank, of all deposits the seller retains as liquidated damages for a buyer's default in a transaction, not to exceed the paragraph 8A. So in other words, if the deal falls apart and the buyer has put in a 20% of the sale price in escrow, if the buyer defaults for some reason, then what it's saying is that we as the broker are entitled to 50% of that. The seller would be entitled to 50%. We as the broker would be entitled to 50%. I like to always fill out anything when it says if left blank, so I recommend you do that. Cooperation and compensation to other brokers. This is automatically filled out for you, but basically we do it on the 6% that we already created. We're going to do 3%. It also gives you the option to write in a dollar amount, but that's a little bit tricky because we don't always know the price at which it's going to sell unless you're working on a flat fee. And it also lets you, it says here that it's based on the purchase price, 3% to a single agent for a buyer, or 3% of the purchase price to a transaction. We also have a section here which is 3% to a broker that has no broker relationship. I recommend you use that one also. That has to do with like attorneys, or if it's somebody that is not being represented that also earns the commission. And then the final one, it says none of the above. If this is correct, property cannot be placed on the MLS. This is sometimes it's when you're writing a contract with yourself. Okay. Then it talks about the broker relationship. It talks about conditional terms, which is basically when you're going to terminate the listing agreement. What we do is we give the seller an opt-out. If for any reason you're not happy with my services within those 6 months, you can cancel, but you can cancel at a price. Standard is $1,000. In other words, I've invested on getting photographs, on doing showings, on paying valet, on setting this up on the MLS, and for some reason you decide that you don't want to work with me, well then you need to compensate me for that. So I recommend you put at least $1,000 in there. That'll hold that seller to think twice before jumping from agent to agent to agent and not giving you the opportunity to sell. The next section has to do with dispute resolutions. You want to make sure that they sign all that. And we're almost done. The final section is going to be right here, additional terms. These automatically get filled out for you. These are just the suggestion of what we think you should be putting in. If you want to change any of this part, by all means, do. The first one has to do with reiterating the fact that you are working as a transaction broker, and it states the law in which it says that. The second one says that the seller agrees to pay London Foster an administrative fee of $5.95. If you do not want to charge the fee, you can take out that line completely. If you want to charge a different fee, let's say you want to charge $3.95, you would change it here. Line 164, seller agrees to provide the broker with the contact information of the HOA, the Homeowner Association, management company, and tenants, if applicable. You want to make sure you reiterate this because you want to do your due diligence, put up any forms, any contracts, anything you want to put on the listing, you want to make sure you put it in there. And then finally, it says that the seller agrees to fill out completely the seller's disclosure form to the best of their knowledge and disclose any information pertinent to the property. This is a protection for you, but it's also because you're going to be listing an assessment, maintenance. You're going to be disclosing information if there was a fire, if there was a flood, anything like that. You want to make sure you know it so that you can actually disclose it on the MLS. Okay, here you want to make sure you fill out the seller's information. You want to fill out the broker's information. And you're done. So basically what you would do now that we filled this all out is you would save it. You're going to get a little thing here that says that it was saved. Okay. And you're able to exit from that contract. So now we can go to the next contract. The next contract is a non-lawyer disclosure. This is a protection, especially in Miami, where we have a lot of international clients that speak German and French and Spanish and Portuguese. You want to make sure that they understand the fact that you have created this contract, but that you are not an attorney, and that you are not their attorney and not there to give them legal advice. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill out your name. And it's going to ask you for your name several times. And what it's saying here is that you are not part of the legal association, that you're not a paralegal, that you're not It's going to ask your name several times, which is what they're identifying here is that you are not an attorney, that you're not permitted to give legal information, that you are just writing in a contract as a realtor, not as an attorney. Okay? And then we are going to also identify the fact that the seller can read and write in English. So you want to make sure you fill that out. It's also going to say that if they are not able to read or write in English, it was read to me by. This is just to reiterate to the client that you are not an attorney, that you are not there to translate, you are not there to interpret the law, that you're just filling out a contract. If they need additional information, that you can gladly refer them to an attorney that specializes in real estate, which obviously we can reach out to the people at Title Now, which you can find at www.net under vendors. Tahir is their in-house attorney, and you can refer it to them, and that'll be very efficient, and that way you don't have any legal issues of your own. And then finally is going to be the seller's disclosure, which we will not be filling out. It very clearly states here this form must be filled out by the seller and therefore cannot be completed by the agent or broker in form simplicity. However, this can be filled out electronically by the seller in the e-sign section. A full e-sign template has been created for him. And basically what this is a form that is going to ask him, hey, how's that property doing? And it's going to go section by section, asking him if there's been any damages. They have to fill that out to the best of their knowledge. Okay, so basically we filled out all of the content. We're ready to go. Now that we've done this and we've gone through all the boring part, now we're going to go through the fun part. What we're going to do now is we're going to click on this master cell that clicks all the rest of the contracts, and we are going to go into choose form below and we're going to ask for it to e-sign. Okay, so this next section we're going to ask them to e-sign. What it will do is it's going to ask you two options. One, would you like to create an e-sign based on the information that was provided? Since I have not really provided any email addresses, it kind of defeats the point. But if I had filled out the content page with email addresses and everything else, here I don't have to fill it out again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a session. Now that we've filled out the content page of our property, and we have also gone in contract by contract and filled out those contracts completely, we can now go back into our active section, look up the folder that represents that property. We can go to this master cell and click all of the contracts that we filled out individually, and we can also go to this master cell and click on the two pieces of information that we saved as a PDF, both the IMAP and the tax. And what we're going to do is we're going to group this all together as one single file, and we're going to send it off to the seller to sign and execute. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we click on all the information there, make sure it's all together. Then we're going to go to the choose forms below and basically what you're going to tell this document is I want to choose all of these forms and I want to make sure that they e-sign it. When you e-sign it, this is an upgrade for form simplicity. I recommend you do it. It makes your life a lot easier. It's something like $70 or $80 a year, which is a very small cost for your business, and more importantly, facilitating the fact that your clients are able to sign electronically and that you have proof that they've signed electronically. So you want to click on that E section, and it's going to give you two options. One, that you can create a session, or that you can, based on the information you have already provided, create a session. I like using create a session because that way it creates a brand new one. So again, this is an upgrade from For Simplicity. It's going to send it to a little engine, and basically what it's going to do is going to group all of these files together, and wherever it is identified that the seller needs to sign, it's going to say done. So you don't have to sit there and manipulate each one. There are some that you have to, like for instance the non-lawyer disclosure. You're going to have to do a little bit of manipulating there, but I'll show you real quick how to do that. Okay, so automatically when it's created the session, it will knock you out and it'll take you to this other section where it says e-sign should automatically open in a tab or window. If it does not, check your pop blocker or click here. So go ahead and click there, and that's going to open up your e-sign session for you. It's going to give you the name of the transaction that you created, 5025 Collins Avenue, apartment 1604. It's going to give you a title. So let's say I could put Mr. Rodriguez. Obviously what you want to do is you want to make this as recognizable as possible so that when your client gets it via email, they understand that it's intended for them, that it's coming from you, and what it's about. I would copy this Mr. Rodriguez and put it here as a salutation. Mine has already been set up so that it includes please initial and sign accordingly. You can call or text me directly at 646-725-2026 or email me at memo@londonfoster.com. Best, and it has my signature. Okay. This section right here is going to ask you if you want an email address to be emailed once everything is completed. I like putting in my email address there because that way I get a confirmation that everybody that's involved in this section, it's only going to be one person, but if it was 5 people signing, then I would want to have a conclusion, and that way I have it all there. It's going to ask me if I want to send it one at a time. Obviously here we're only doing one person, but if we had more than one, I would recommend you send them all at one time. That makes it a lot easier. It asks me if I want to include me as a signer. Allow signers to delegate for another person. This would be when you have, let's say, not in this transaction, but when you have a buyer and a seller, and you represent the buyer and someone else is representing the seller. So what you would want to do is maybe put in the email address of the realtor, and the realtor can then assign it to the seller. Send a CC of the final documents as attachments, and then set reminders. You're going to hit next. Now that it's done that, it's going to ask me to A, add a signer, B, go into my address book, and identify who's going to be signing on this contract. Okay, so I'm going to add a signer, and I'm going to put in the first name and the last name, and I'm going to use an email address. Obviously, I'm using my own email because I want to make sure that you guys are able to see what the person receives. And then I'm going to save it. So by doing that, I'm including this person in my address book. But I'm also putting them in as a section. So what you want to do is you want to hit the master cell. You've now identified that John Doe at this email address, memo@londonfoster.com, is going to be the signer. You hit next, and then it's going to ask you to identify who is the seller, which is what we're doing here since it's a listing agreement. So we're going to say seller number 1 is John Doe. Once we have identified that, you're able to hit next. So now what it's doing is that it's pulling up that person that you identified from your address book. It's placing their information so that they can initial and sign every single section of this contract. You can hit on one of these and you can actually view all the contracts all over again, or you can hit the master cell and just press next. Now it's going to take you to a section that allows you to add or to remove different signatures that have already been included there. If you forgot to do something on the contract, this is a good section to write something in. So let's say, for instance, if I forgot that there was something here in the refrigerator wall oven, I can click on text and I can add some text in here. Okay? If I wanted to write, it's a bad example, but let's say I wanted to write USA, I can write USA in there. Okay? So since we have the ability for John Doe to add signatures and initials, we're going to go over the contract real quick, make sure that all the initials are there. You see right here in this section under seller, this is going to be an initial for John Doe. And they're automatically placed so that you don't have to identify where they are. There's another one up here in line 55. There's another one over here on page 2. Page 3, there's 2. Page 4. There's a signature and there's a date. Then you have the initial on the bottom. So here's the part that I was telling you about on non-lawyer disclosure. On the non-lawyer disclosure, you're going to want to make sure that they're able to click that they read English, and if they don't, you want to make sure that they write who read this to them and in what language. So let's say, for instance, you want them to be able to click I can read English. You would go to this checkbox section and add it there. If you want to make sure that they identify that they don't speak English, that's where you would do that. If you want to add a form field, in other words, for them to write in some text, here you go. Another form field for them to write in the language, here you go. You want to make sure that the person is signing their signature. You're going to put it here. And you're going to want to make sure that they put their date. You put that here. So now that's completed. You keep on going down. And here is the seller's property disclosure for a condominium. Again, you can't fill this out for them, but you can identify where they want to initial, and they're going to have to fill this out. And what you've done is you've identified that they're the person to do this. You see, again, their signatures is there. And then they have all this section to write in. I've also added the IMAP and the tax information for that section. So you would go to next, And here it just reiterates everywhere that you've done it, and you press next. It sends you back to the email that you originally wrote. Just double check it, make sure everything's fine, and write finish. So while it does that, oh, here we go. Since it did that, now it shows you the session information. And it'll tell you what contracts went out. It tells you what happened, which is that at June 24th at 10:51 and 34 seconds, I invited John Doe at the address memo@londonfoster.com to sign. Okay? So you're going to be able to identify all that. We can go ahead and close this session and go back into Form Simplicity under Active. Okay? So I want to show you guys really quick, which is under the transaction. You're able to go into History, and here it'll have all the history for that transaction, everything that was done, that I added these forms, that I added these documents via email, that I created a session, and here's a session that we used. If you want a status, you can click on status, and it'll take you back to that section that we looked at before, where you can click on it.
Yeah, no worries. I'm waiting for
Now let's look at our email. So if you see this email, it's saying that I have been invited to sign. This is what your client will get. Mr. Rodriguez, please initial and sign the contract accordingly, blah, blah, blah. You want to click review and sign. When you click review and sign, it's going to tell you what your name is. You want to make sure that your clients understand that this is the way it appears. Let's say John Doe has an initial. He wants to make sure that that initial appears. How do you know what the name should be? It should be whatever is on his driver's license, because that is what you will be using. So it's always a good idea to ask your seller and your buyer or anyone you're dealing a contract with to give you a driver's license. And I would have added that into the contract. And here you changed it. The seller will then identify that they agree to the terms of this contract. And they hit start. And now, here it just tells you what the color codes mean. Yellow is signature, this color is form field, this color is drop down, whatever it might be. Your seller would then hit start. It'll take them to the very first initial. Hit next. It'll take them to the next initial. They click on it, hit next, click on it, hit next, click on it, hit next. It'll ask them to sign, hit next, identify the date, hit next. So this is very simple. Here it's going to ask you, can you read English? If they can, then they click there. If they cannot, they would click here, go to next. They would write the name of the person that read them the contract. Okay. Click on it, sign. Click on it, the date. And then here, they would have to start filling out this section. So one by one, your client would have to fill out every part of the seller's disclosure. If they have any information that they want to provide. Obviously, I'm not going to fill it all out, but your seller would fill all this out. They would click on all these sections to make sure that they're completed.
How much was it?
And then once they're done, they can click on done. If there was something that was missing, it won't let you complete it. So now I think I'm done.
And now everything is made.
And it says, would you like to finish your session? Obviously, we didn't fill out the seller's disclosure. Your seller would have to fill that out. But now it'll tell you, congratulations, your signing is complete. So let me just show you real quick on the email. Okay, so we're gonna go back into our email, and if you look here in the very first email, it says signing completed. Congratulations, all the parties have signed this session. You can now download this document. And now you have access to this document. You can download it. You can obviously download it individually. You can download it all as one document, save it into your cloud, or email it into your Form Simplicity email that we provided for you, and therefore you have it stored. So basically what we've gone over to right now is how to fill out a listing agreement, how to do an e-sign, and how to save it for future use. I hope this helped, and again, this section is for londonfoster.net under Office Manager, Forms and Contracts, Sales Listing Agreement.